It's Tuesday, 12:30, and welcome. I'm so excited for you all to be joining us for the Michele TV Show. It's another beautiful day, the birds are singing, and isn't it great to be alive? It's just, I'm so full of bounding with energy and joy, and it must be because today is all about humour and laughter and fun. And my special guest today is the amazing Kate Burr. So Kate is an incredible author, everything you can think of. She has been there and done that. And she is a humour specialist. She works with leadership teams and leaders to help them integrate laughter and fun so they get more engagement, more productivity, and essentially have a lot more fun in their everyday lives. So welcome, Kate.
Hello, how are you all? Thank you very much for having me on.
It's wonderful for you to join us today. And do you want to explain a little bit to people about how you came to be here and what some of your background is?
Oh, okay. So we're going to go back to 2001. I had always thought about doing stand-up comedy, and I finally plucked up the courage to enter a open mic competition. It was part of Triple J and Raw Comedy and the Melbourne International Comedy Festival sort of competition. So I did that back in 2001, and it was back in the day we had to handwrite the application form and post it in the letterbox. So as soon as I posted it in the letterbox and my fingers left that letter, I was like, what have I done? So thankfully, the first gig that I ever did wasn't too bad. That all went well. I was like, phew, awesome. And then sort of just dabbled in stand-up comedy for a number of years. And in about 2007, I think it was, I was like, I need to know if this is going to work for me full-time or not. So I took 2 weeks off work and did an Adelaide Fringe show, which is one of the biggest arts festivals in the Southern Hemisphere. And I did that and I had a great time. I did 5 shows worth of comedy over a week and went back to my day job and sat at my desk and went, I am not in the right spot anymore. So a couple of months later, I had done what everybody tells artists not to do, and I quit my day job and I pursued comedy full time, which was very, very exciting.
Very brave of you as well.
I know, very brave, very stupid, one or the other. And then things got really interesting. A couple of years later, I had a little baby girl and couldn't do stand-up comedy the same way I used to. So what I to do was started to work out something else to do. So I thought, well, I can't go out to a stand-up comedy club for 4 hours with travel time and stuff because logistically that was too tricky. So I thought, well, I'll do a comedy show at a local tennis club just for mums. And so we did. So I set it all up. It was May the 4th, actually, back in 2010. So we're coming up for its almost 11-year reunion, which is very exciting. But I did this thing. I was like, oh yeah, we'll just do an hour-long show. The idea is that it's at a local tennis club, invite all the local mums, leave the baby at home with dad, race out for an hour, come back before baby or dad's crying, one or the other. Let's see which one. And that went really, really well. We had Channel 7 News come for the first show. I was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And so this continued on a monthly basis for a while. And then after one of the first or second show, I think it was, we had this bunch of mums come running up to me and the other comedians on for the night and said, do you do this as fundraiser for school? We need to do this as a school fundraiser. And I'm like, yes, but I had no idea what to do. So I said, yeah, we can totally do a fundraiser. So very quickly, this model of doing just a comedy show for mums at a local tennis club turned into a fundraising model where we'd take our mobile comedy club out to schools and sporting clubs and run fundraisers, and everyone would get drunk. They would have a good laugh. They'd sell some tickets. They'd raise a whole heap of money, and everyone had a great time. So I was basically gone from comedian to business owner, and I had no idea what I was doing in the business sense. So I had to go and find some business groups that would help me with the business side of things. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dale Beaumont. He runs a fabulous program called Business Blueprint, and that was my lifesaver. I was sort of like rocked up there and it was like, oh, these are my people. There's all these entrepreneurs doing all these cool businessy things, and it was great fun to learn all the things about business, right from leadership through to social media, the Google analytics and everything in between from a business perspective. And one night when I was at one of the conference dinners, I was sitting across from one of the speakers for the day, and her name's Amanda Stevens, and we were having a chat about what we did. And I said, I do stand-up comedy. She's like, oh my gosh, do you teach speakers how to be funny? Because Amanda Stevens is one of the biggest Australian professional speakers, which I didn't actually know at the time. But she goes, do you teach speakers how to be funny? And I'm like, no, that's not even a job. She's like, it is. And so she introduced me to a couple of her speaker buddies, and I started working with them and found out that it turns out that it actually was a job. And so I sort of went from comedian to business owner to humor coach, and then working with all these speakers that are working with corporates in all sorts of different ranges of topics and amazing things like that. I'm like, you know what, I think that what I'm teaching from a humor perspective could actually also be applicable to corporates. And so I sort of jumped again from helping speakers to now helping leaders and managers with their people. So that's sort of how I ended up where I am. I guess.
Wow, from the tennis club to the boardroom. I love and it shows that those core skills, you know, being able to adapt them. And so what do you think, you know, whether you've been working with the local mums or the local businessmen or the senior businessmen and speakers, etc., what do you think success then means to you?
So for me, is really about using your skills for good and continually improving and just learning and improving and helping others. So one of the three, some of my biggest values are authenticity, acceptance, and courage. And so I think the more authentic you are and the more true you are to your own self, but also your skills and talents, because everyone in the world's got different skills and talents. It's just a matter of working out which skills and talents are going to help other people the best. And so for me, success is actually being able to work out what that skill and talent is and then taking that out to the world and helping others with that.
Oh, what a beautiful way of looking at it. I really like that authenticity and the courage, and I've heard the same concept. People describe it as everybody standing on a mountain of value, and you know, understanding and knowing what that mountain is of value and what you are here to give the world, whatever that skill set may be. I think that's a beautiful way that you've described it there as well. And is that similar to your passions, or do you think you're passionate about different things?
I think my passions are slightly different from what I think success is. One thing I just wanted to talk about too, about using your skills for good and taking them out to the world, is that a lot of people go, I think a lot of people hold themselves back and go, oh, well, there's no room for me in the world. And it's like, there is room for everyone. And the reason that the world works is because everybody has different skills and talents. For example, I'm not good with looking after old people, but there are other people who are brilliant at caring for the elderly. I've got no interest in learning all numbers and figures, but there is people that love to do my accounts every day. So there is the reason that the world works is there's diversity, and so we have to make sure that we can bring that everywhere. And like I say to my daughter, the best person to share a box of chocolates with is the person who hates all the ones that you love.
I love that, and I think COVID is one of those times that has really shown that for people as well. As you know, the local person stocking the toilet paper suddenly became just as important as other roles in society. I think we really started to understand that wonderful concept a lot more, where everybody has their skills and their gifts, and you know, somebody being able to do your accounts and somebody else being able to do other things is, you know, just as important for how successful you are in what you do.
Exactly, yeah. And so it means we don't have to compete against each other. We can just all collaborate. So that's really quite cool.
That's wonderful.
And
sorry?
I was going to say, I think that's what leads me into what I'm passionate about. Because, and you know, when you take a while to realize what you're passionate about until the themes keep popping up in your life and you go, I think that's what it is. So what I'm passionate about is helping people feel good and confident and in control of their own lives. And I didn't realize this at the time, but that was one of the main driving factors around the mum comedy. It's just like, I just want people to feel good, like have a laugh, feel like they're not the only ones doing it, feel confident in the fact that I'm not the only one going through this hardness, like, and stuff. And so it's like, okay, yep, cool. And then by people feeling okay with themselves, then there's that air of confidence about, well, and in control of like, well, I can actually do things for my life. So that's the things that I am passionate about and fascinated about, is how we can help, like, do that for ourselves and help others. And obviously, if that goes well, great. If you don't feel good and you don't feel confident and you don't feel in control, that's a slippery slope down to mental health issues, which I've also had too. So I think that using all of those skills for mental wellness, I think, is probably where I'm super passionate about.
And that's wonderful, because you raise a really important point that more and more any kind of role, I think, needs to be much more aware of how they're empowering or supporting other people with that mental wellness. And again, whether we're talking about somebody that's an accountant that looks at numbers and how they share the information about numbers, and because there's a different way of delivering messages,
yeah,
right the way through to the sorts of work that we do in that leadership space, where you're working with human beings at the end of the day, and they have so many different stresses, and how can you support and empower them with those stresses? Which leads us nicely on to those, what would be some of the key tips that you would share that about, you've obviously created the successful mindset yourself. What would you say are tips for others to create a successful mindset as well?
Yeah, well, I'll explain this in a little bit of a roundabout way, but it will come back, so don't worry. But that's what comedians do. We always go off on a tangent and then we come back. So one of the things that happened in my comedy career is that I spent a lot of time doing a lot of parenting around, a lot of humor around parenting and how hard it was to be a mum. And what happened through that process was that I was laughing about how crap my life was, without giving any consideration to how crap my life actually was. And what happened for me is that I would feel great on stage because I'd have all this laughter, and then I'd step off stage and feel terrible. And it got to the point where it was so bad I had to call in the professionals, psychologists, and go, can you help me? And that's where I received a very unexpected diagnosis of clinical depression that started from when my daughter was born. So it was like postnatal depression, and then it went into full-blown clinical depression. And so that's when I'm sitting in the psychologist's office going, are you kidding me? Like, I'm a comedian, my specialty is laughter and being happy, and how the hell did I end up with depression? And I had this brainwave that, well, if comedy got me into this, then comedy better get me out of it. In that sort of realization, I guess, I had this realization that laughter is only half of the equation. So laughing is actually the byproduct of what a comedian does to generate that laughter. And so this is where my 3 tips to success mindset come in. So for a comedian to get laughter, they have to do 3 things really well. They have to be really conscious, like, what's going on? What can I use for material? They're curious. They look at it from every single angle to find the funny, and then they're creative to come up with a joke. And so I'm like, well, I'm not coming up with a joke right now. I need to come up with a solution to my problems. So I went, let's get really conscious about what's happening, get really curious as to why it's happening, and then creative on how to fix it. And so those 3 things that I do now, I think, are very instrumental to any sort of success that I have. So often when you've got a problem, so let's take a really simple leadership problem about somebody being late to work every day. And everyone gets really upset because this person's late to work and they're not pulling their weight and rah, rah, rah. And they send out passive aggressive emails about what time people should start and whatever else, but they don't necessarily address the problem. So the conscious is everyone's upset that somebody's turning up for late for work. The curious part of that would be, why are they turning up for late to work? It might be a parent OSH or out of school care doesn't start till this time, then they've got traffic. So it's literally impossible for them to get there right on time. They're often 5 minutes late. It's probably going to keep happening, but now at least we know why. So then the creative part of that process would be, well, can we either get school to start earlier so that they can get here a bit earlier? Can we get them to drop the person off somewhere? No, maybe not. Is it okay if they start 5 minutes late? Everyone in the office knows that they're going to start 5 minutes late. They're going to have 5 minutes less on their lunch break, or they're going to stay 5 minutes late at the other end of the day, or whatever, but they're going to make up that time. Is everyone okay with that? And all of a sudden, this frustration for somebody being late is like, it's all okay.
It's such an important point that you raised there, and thank you for sharing so much of your journey in that as well. I think there'll be lots of people watching that will really resonate with some of what you've been saying, and there's quite a lot in what you've been saying. But I think for me and the work that I do with my clients as well, it's very much about that transparency, and I love how you walked through that example about somebody being late to work, because the snide comments, the passive aggressive, all of those techniques that you're talking about that groups and teams kind of fall into when there's that resentment or whatever the emotions might be that come up. What happens as soon as people find out the reason, you know, they're taking care of a sick child, a sick relative, or this or that, they then move from angry and frustrated into compassion. Now, leaders and people in our sorts of roles, task is to actually help them to uncover that compassion earlier and to find out the stories behind what's going on. And I think humour actually plays a really important role in that, in making sure that people feel heard and respected and cared for, even though it might seem like a bit of an oxymoron that you're actually making jokes or kidding around about things.
Yeah.
Especially for adults, I think singing and playing and laughter are the three things that can unlock that what's underneath something and what's underneath something, because all too often those behaviours that kind of get entrenched in teams and cultures are there because people haven't had, and that's why I liked earlier you talked about courage, they haven't had the courage to have those conversations, to invite that level of vulnerability and honesty about, well, actually there's no children, there's no elderly parents, I'm late because I'm having a really hard time and I can't get out of bed in the morning. You know, imagine that kind of conversation compared to, you know, people hiding it through all sorts of other kind of methods and conversations that don't help anybody.
Yeah, 100%. And it's all about that getting awareness and getting understanding so that then you can do something with that. Like if you don't have the full picture, you can't do anything. Like it's so much harder to get a result that's going to be suitable when you don't actually know the 100% of what's going on.
And that's where I love comedy and humour, because, or making jokes and things, because there can be truth behind things when people are being silly and in those sorts of situations. The sorts of truths that in an everyday conversation, especially in offices, people have so many self-survival levels and layers, so they don't necessarily share things or share who they are. And humour, you know, they might say things that if you're listening and like you are, if you're trained to listen, you actually hear it and you go, oh, that's really what's going on. And they're not going to share that because, you know, obviously it's quite a personal or a deep issue. But once you have that knowledge, you can kind of guide the situation to help bring it out.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's really important to, a lot of the time when people talk about humour in the workplace, they think about the cracking jokes and the inappropriateness and trips to HR and all that sort of thing. I think that it's probably a good idea to just have a quick chat about the benefits of laughter anyway in a workplace. So because often people go, well, we have to be serious, we're doing work. And it's like, well, laughter actually has so many benefits. Like it fires up all your, like to get jokes, you have to actually fire up all different parts of your brain. Like, so every single part of your brain's working at once. It reduces your cortisol levels, it increases your endorphin levels. So like it's really good on a physiological and psychological benefit to have laughter. And I think where people, a lot of time people get held up with humor in the workplace is they think about humor in the wrong context, because a lot of time our experience with humor is in the context of humor for entertainment. So stand-up comedy shows, Netflix specials, comedy clubs, telling jokes at the pub, those sorts of things, they're all around entertainment. And what we actually want to do when we bring it into the workplace is we want to use humor for engagement. So the focus isn't all around cracking jokes and getting laughs and being funny. It's the focus can be much more around altering people's states. So getting them from a not so happy mood, like not so positive state to a positive state, connecting with them, because there's so much stuff around the research around humor helps connect each other, and also engaging people. So it's like, rather than thinking about it in the context of being funny, getting laughs and cracking jokes, think about it in altering, connecting and engaging.
I think that that's a really good distinction, and sorry about the phone going earlier.
I was like, that wasn't me. Yes.
I thought after all the preparation and all of the pre-show work, technology, you gotta love it. I nearly burst out laughing. I thought, no, control. Especially when we're talking about appropriate behaviours, etc. So I think you make that really wonderful distinction about humour in the workplace. It's not necessarily there for entertainment value. It is there as a team building, as a connection and as a communication. Mm-hmm. And I think that for many people watching today, and many of the commentary we got through social media before the show, where they were talking about a little bit of concern around, appropriateness, because what I might find funny and instantaneously laugh about, somebody else might be offended by.
Yeah,
I think that that's a really good distinction when maybe thinking about, well, if I'm having this laughter or making these joking around comments, is it because I'm trying to be a clown and be entertaining? Or is it because I'm trying to get the group to come together and I want people to engage? And, I'm saying to somebody, you're slower than a snail kind of thing. And as a way to try and speed them up, but not as a way to, shame them or anything.
Yeah.
Shame snails or anything.
I'm not going into snail shaming.
Yeah. I don't want to be on Twitter attacked about snails and stuff.
It's also interesting reading all the comments that were on LinkedIn about this show today too, because there was so much around cracking jokes in the workplace. And I actually have a saying that if you want to be funny, don't tell jokes. My biggest things that I do is joke telling is so difficult in a workplace situation and so detrimental in a workplace situation for two main reasons. The first reason is if you start something with three men walk into a bar or, hey, I've got a joke for you, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, they're telling a joke. They're going to be funny. And what happens is if it's not funny, there is nowhere to hide. Like you have left it all hanging out. So it's a very high risk situation for you to tell jokes, because if you're going to start a joke, you better make sure it gets a laugh, because otherwise your credibility is going to be sliding down a very slippery slope. The second thing that is a problem with jokes is that if you're listening to somebody and they're like, oh, I've got a joke for you, you go, oh, here we go. Because I think often it's like, oh, this is not going to be good and this is not going to end well. But
it's going to be a dag joke or something.
Yeah. So they start telling a joke, and then that puts a very high expectation on the listener to do something. So they either have to respond in some way, shape or form. So if they don't, one of you is wrong. So one of you is wrong for telling something that's not funny, or the other person's wrong for not laughing at your funny joke. And so what ends up happening, instead of connecting people with humor, you've actually put people in a confrontational situation where you're against them.
And it makes it very awkward, because there's that expectation of a reaction. And if they don't react in the way that you've set up that you want them to be reacting in, then exactly what you're saying, there can be that misalignment between it.
Yeah, so I teach clients when I do humor coaching is how to use stealth humor. So stealth humor is much more about you don't feel like you're saying anything funny. The audience or the recipient doesn't feel like they're listening to anything funny, but everyone's engaged and connected and having a good time. So
I wanted to ask you in particular, and we've got about 5 minutes left now.
yeah.
There was also comments around, using deprecating humor. And so do you mean when you're talking about stealth humor, is it deprecating, or how is it different to deprecating humor?
Yeah, well, and I think
is where I'm putting myself down to be funny.
Yeah, so that's the other thing that a lot of people have a misconception around with humor is like, oh, if you want to be funny, just use self-deprecating humor. And 100% agree, if you want to be funny, do that, because it actually works. And that's why so many comedians do it, because it actually works. You putting yourself on a pedestal, then knocking yourself down is quite entertaining for people. However, in a leadership role, that's not going to work very well. So if you put yourself, like if you're in a position of leadership and then you start attacking yourself for the sake of getting a laugh, you have actually destroyed all of your credibility in the process of doing that. So it's a very slippery slope to go down, a slippery slope of disrespect, because if you start tearing yourself down, then that gives other people permission to tear you down as well. And also, if you've got any sort of imposter syndrome that sort of creeps in every now and then about who do you think you are and what are you doing, if you start verbalizing that in this form of self-deprecating humor, the imposter syndrome goes, see, I was right for trying to protect you and keep you safe and keep you small and keep you little. So
I think that sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's very true. There's a difference between being authentic and saying, oh, I made a mistake here. I can be an idiot too, as opposed to doing it all the time to get those laughs and to feel connected with people. As a leader, you need to keep that credibility. So a little bit which shows, yes, you're human like everybody else, and authentic. You're laughing at yourself when you screw up and everybody screws up.
Yeah.
That using it as a tool for getting humour or as a team building doesn't, I think, work in the workplace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it sort of leads on to that, the concept of comedy casualties as well, where everyone has a laugh at the expense of one person. So it might be one person in the team's like the butt of all the jokes and everyone's like, ha, that's Dave. Dave can handle it, whatever. And Dave might handle it every now and then, but if it becomes a permanent thing, it's just like, guys, this is not working for me. So there is plenty of other ways to do humor that don't have, you're not telling jokes, you're not doing self-deprecating humor, and you're also not having that casualty where everyone's having having a laugh at the expense of one person.
Yeah, and I think that's even more important nowadays, is to be much more, everybody's aware about being kinder in the workplace and kinder to each other, with this wonderful focus now on workplace mental health. And I think the biggest message from today's show is that, yes, use stealth humour. So don't put yourself out there as the town comedian, etc., because
exactly.
it won't necessarily work.
Yeah.
So we've covered so many fabulous topics and areas today, and I'm just having a quick look on social media. But as I do, what do you think, if you were to tell yourself or talk to yourself about a key message for your younger self, what would you say to your younger self?
Yeah, is that you may have a set of skills and talents that you don't think are valued by society, and it is your job to find out what those skills and talents are and who and how they can help the world and help serve the world. So don't feel like you have to be somebody that you're not, because there is plenty of other people doing all the other things. So you need to do what you're good at, not what you think you should be doing.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. And how can people get hold of you, Kate?
It's probably the best way to get hold of me is through LinkedIn. My handle is kateburr.com. So KATEBURR and then DOTCOM.
So that's actually your name in LinkedIn, is it?
Yes, because somebody else got Kate Burr before I did. So I had to put the DOTCOM on the end of it.
Oh, that's fabulous.
And I would love to meet this Kate Burr. I think she lives in New York or something. So Maybe after COVID,
Woo!
we'll go and visit her and do a meetup.
That's it. You could do a Kate Burr touring show together.
I know. Go and meet all the Kates.
A meeting of the Kates. That's it. Well, it's been such a pleasure and my honour today to have you on the show and to share so much wonderful wisdom about using humour and laughter in the workplace. So thank you again. Thank you so much, Kate.
You're more than welcome. It was great to be on, Michelle. Thank you.
And next week we have the amazing Steve Wee. So more wonderful tips and tricks about creating and building that mindset for success, whether it's using humour, like with the amazing Kate today, or with some of the other guests. But until next week, I'd love to say from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.